Jake found a tape in his father's basement. It was old, labelless, and covered in dust. He turned on the video and saw himself as a little boy, about 5 years old, playing in the living room. Strange, he thought. But when the scene changed, he saw himself yesterday, walking into that very basement and picking up the tape. And then a voiceover said, "You'll die in 7 days. We already recorded it."
Jake's father died 3 months ago. The doctors said it was a heart attack. His heart stopped in his sleep. He never even woke up. Jake hadn't spoken to his father in years, but death is death. He needed to take care of the house, unpack, decide what to keep and what to throw away. The house was on the outskirts of town, an old one, built in the 1980s. Jake went there once a week, sorting through boxes, furniture, old clothes. He saved the basement for last. He didn't want to go down there. It was too dark, too damp, too full of memories. That Saturday, he finally made a decision. He grabbed a flashlight and descended the creaky stairs. Downstairs smelled of mold and old wood. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars, old magazines, and tools. Jake began unpacking the boxes, putting the necessary things in one pile and the junk in another. In the corner, under a pile of rags, he spotted a VCR. An old cassette player, like the kind they used in the 90s. A stack of tapes lay nearby. Jake sorted through them, old movies, football recordings, a few TV shows. And one tape without a label. Just a blank tape, covered in dust, as if it hadn't been touched in years. Jake picked up the tape and turned it over in his hands. Curiosity got the better of him. He went upstairs to where the old TV with the VCR stood, the one his father had once hooked up but never used. Jake inserted the tape and pressed play. The screen began to vibrate, and static appeared. Then an image appeared. The living room. The very same one Jake was sitting in now. But the furniture was different, the wallpaper different. A little boy was sitting on the floor, playing with cars. Jake looked closer and went cold. It was him. A boy of about 5, wearing the same teddy bear pajamas he still remembered. The scene changed. Now the screen showed a teenager. He was about 14 years old. He was sitting at a desk, doing homework. Jake remembered that day. He was studying for a math exam. But who was filming this? His father? His mother? They never used cameras. Another shot. 20 years old. A student in a dorm with friends. A moment in a life no one could know about. Jake watched, disbelieving. The film showed his life. Year after year. Moments he remembered, and those he had forgotten. Then the image flickered, and static appeared. When the screen went blank, Jake saw himself. Yesterday. He was going down to the basement, going to a shelf, and picking up a film. The very same one he was watching now. Jake froze. This couldn't be happening. No one filmed him yesterday. He was alone. Suddenly, the image changed. The same room he'd been sitting in appeared on the screen. Jake saw himself outside. He was sitting in front of the television, watching a recording. A figure stood next to him, slightly behind him. Dark, blurry, but clearly human. Jake turned around abruptly. No one was there. The room was empty. He looked at the screen again. The figure was approaching. Now it was standing right behind him, leaning toward his ear. A voice came from the television. "You will die in 7 days. We've already recorded it. Don't turn it off." Jake jumped up and pressed stop. The screen went blank. His heart pounded in his throat. He pulled out the tape and looked at it. It was an ordinary film, nothing special. He shoved it in his pocket and ran outside. The next day, he forgot about the tape. He returned to his normal life, work, and household chores. But that evening, when he entered the apartment, the television was on. The screen hummed with static, and in the corner of the room stood a figure. The same blurry figure from the screen. 6 days, whispered the voice from the television. Jake closed his eyes. When he opened them, the figure was gone. But the tape was lying on the table. He hadn't brought it home. Jake didn't sleep all night. He sat in his chair, staring at the door, waiting for the figure to reappear. But it was quiet. Only the clock on the wall ticked, counting down the minutes until dawn. In the morning, he convinced himself it had all been just a nightmare. Overwork, stress over his father's death, an old tape that had accidentally turned on. It all made sense. He went to work, trying not to think about it. The day passed as usual, calls, meetings, paperwork. By evening, he had almost calmed down. He even allowed himself to smile. When he returned home, the TV was on again. The screen crackled. Jake turned it off and went into the kitchen to make some tea. But when he returned, the TV was back on. The screen showed the same room. He sat in his chair, staring into space. The figure stood behind him, closer now, almost touching his shoulder. 5 days, the voice whispered. Jake grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. He unplugged the tape. He sat on the floor and covered his face with his hands. His heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. He looked up. The tape was lying on the table. He hadn't taken it with him. He'd left it in the car. He checked his pockets, his keys, his bag. The tape was there, staring back at him, its label blank. Jake grabbed the tape, ran outside, and threw it in the trash. He stood there and watched the lid slam shut. Then he returned to the apartment, locked the door, and sat there until morning, unable to sleep. In the morning, he opened the door to go to work. The tape was lying on the threshold. A small figure stood next to it. The same girl from the recording, only now she was almost transparent, barely visible in the morning light. She smiled and whispered, "Don't run away. We've just started playing." Jake slammed the door and locked it. He realized it wasn't a dream, not a hallucination. Something had come over him. Something connected with the tape, with his father, with that damn house. He called his mother. She lived in another city, and Jake rarely spoke to her. After the divorce, she moved away, leaving him with his father. Now he regretted not calling more often. "Mom," he said when she answered, "do you remember if your father had old videotapes? Did he ever make any videos?" There was silence on the phone. Then his mother spoke slowly, as if remembering, "Your father, he was into videotaping. Especially when you were little. But then something happened. He stopped. He locked all the tapes in the basement and never touched them again. He said the camera sees things other people don't." "What camera?" Jake asked. "I don't know." He never explained. He only said once, "I filmed something I shouldn't have." Now it's looking back at us. Jake's heart went cold. "Mom, didn't he tell me about the figure? The one that appears in the recordings?" "He did." His mother's voice wavered. "Before he died, he called me. He said the figure got too close, that it was waiting for him to fall asleep. I thought he was delirious. And the next morning, he was gone." Jake thanked her and hung up. He looked at the door where the tape lay. Now he knew what he had to do. Destroy it. Burn it. Rip it up. Crush it into dust. He opened the door. The tape was gone. Only a small figure stood in the hallway, almost real, almost alive. The girl looked at him with empty eyes and held out her hand. In her hand was a tape. "For days," she said. "And we'll be together. Like your father. Just like everyone else watching." Jake screamed and slammed the door. He realized there was no way out. All he could do was wait.
The next 2 days merged into one endless nightmare. Jake barely slept, ate nothing, and only sat in the corner of the room, staring at the door. The figure appeared every evening. First in the hallway, then in the room, then closer. It stood by the bed when he closed his eyes, whispering. The words were unintelligible, but the meaning was clear. Soon. On the third night, Jake couldn't bear it anymore. He turned on the TV, inserted a tape, and pressed play. He had to know the truth. Even if the truth killed him. The screen began to vibrate. An image appeared. He saw himself. As a little boy, about 5 years old, playing in the living room. Then as a teenager, then as a student. Everything was just like the first time. But now the frames moved faster, replacing each other, as if in fast motion. Childhood, adolescence, adulthood. And then suddenly, a stop. The screen showed the same room. Now, Jake sat in front of the television, staring at himself. The figure stood behind him. But now it was clearly visible, almost real. A girl of about 10, wearing a white dress and with long black hair. Only the face was missing. Smooth skin where the eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. "Do you want to see who I am?" she asked, her voice coming from both the television and behind him. Jake turned. She stood a meter away. Faceless, terrifying, real. She reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were icy, leaving a burning sensation on his skin. "Your father accidentally filmed me," she said. "I've always been here. In the walls, in the silence, in the shadows. The camera saw me. And I saw you. Now I'm not alone." "What do you want?" Jake whispered. "I need you," she replied. "Everyone's watching. You give me life. And I give you eternity. Inside the movie." She snapped her fingers, and Jake felt his body go numb. He tried to get up, but couldn't move. The room seemed to be swimming before his eyes. The TV glowed brighter, the screen bending outward, pulling him in. "Don't resist," she whispered. "It doesn't hurt. There are only dreams. Eternal dreams." Jake screamed, but his scream was drowned out by static. The last thing he saw was his reflection on the screen. It was smiling. In the morning, the neighbors called the police. The door to the apartment was open. They found no one inside. Only an old TV playing a noisy channel and a videotape on the floor. The policeman picked it up and turned it over in his hands. The label read, "Next." He stuffed the tape in his pocket and went to write a report. That evening, at home, he saw it on the table, next to the TV. He remembered leaving it at the station, but the tape was still there. He shrugged, inserted it into the VCR, and pressed play. The screen flickered. An image appeared. The policeman saw himself as a little boy, playing in a sandbox. He smiled, remembering his childhood. But suddenly he realized he'd never filmed this video. And he'd never seen this camera. The image changed. He saw himself yesterday, entering Jake's empty apartment. Then himself, picking up the tape. And himself now, sitting in front of the television. And then a voiceover whispered, "You will die in 7 days. We've already recorded it. Welcome home." The policeman turned. A faceless figure stood in the corner of the room, smiling. She was waiting for her next viewer.